Mr. Bowyer, thank you for joining us. I would like to start by asking about your organization's IFES's involvement in the election process in Armenia, presidential election.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. The International Foundation for Electoral Systems works with a variety of local partners and stakeholders in Armenia. We have for several years now, and we've been working with both the Central Election Commission of Armenia as well as domestic and non-governmental organizations to promote improved electoral processes, understanding of the election process and the greater scheme of democracy, and promoting interest in participation in a meaningful way in the election process, because the elections are more than just a single day event in a country. They begin many months prior, and the impact lasts for many, many years. So it's very important to engage at all levels of society in promoting the notion of participatory democracy. This is important for school children to understand, of course, as well as adults. So we've been quite privileged to work with a variety of partners under funding from the U.S. Agency for International Development and others in Armenia to help promote a democratic process in Armenia.
Mm-hmm. Some analysts looking at the current political situation in Armenia say that it's going to be an easy election, that the opposition there's no really opposition, and the incumbent president has more chances to be re-elected. In your opinion, are the political parties ready for presidential campaign? Are they doing enough to fulfill that process?
It's quite interesting in that we had a highly competitive process for the 2012 elections to the National Assembly. We had, for example, the Armenian National Congress for the first time had received 7, I believe, mandates in the parliament. There was a visible campaign process going on there. There certainly were political advertisements. There was some debate and so forth. I think this election thus far has been perhaps more known for who is not running in the election than perhaps for who is running. We certainly know that historically in Armenia, in recent history, incumbent presidents do rather well in re-election situations. Though many suggest that the absence of major opposition persons, such as had been speculated after the National Assembly elections, perhaps Mr. Terpetrosyan would have run for this post as he did in 2008. Also Mr. Sarukian of Prosperous Armenia, but neither elected and opted to run, leaving the field of current 8 candidates perhaps less full than it could have been otherwise. Nevertheless, you do have some well-known figures, Mr. Hovhannisyan, Mr. Bagration, who have been in politics before, who've been there at high levels previously, who are running. I should say thus far we haven't seen on the national stage perhaps a very vibrant and active process. For example, one would hope to see at least some political debates, televised debates between the different candidates coming up. So there is still perhaps time for that, but it's only 3 weeks until the election. So we'll see what happens between now and then. I think it depends on the candidates themselves. There's free airtime that is allocated to all of the candidates, as well as maximums that they themselves can purchase on television and radio. Certainly what is important is to encourage voters to, again, understand the process, decide how they want to participate, and understand in the greater realm the importance of choosing one's representatives.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you were in Armenia for the parliamentary elections during and also in October. In your opinion, is there progress in Armenia's civil society awareness of democratic processes?
I think one of the issues we've seen in Armenia, and this has been at the heart of some of the work IFES has tried to do, is to re-energize political culture in Armenia, which perhaps has fallen off over the last or so decade. For example, one of the issues that Armenia faces in its elections seems to be the perpetual problem of vote selling and vote buying. This was an issue last May. It was certainly an issue in past presidential and parliamentary elections. There is a current campaign underway that IFES is involved with, using several well-known figures, sports figures, chess champions, and others, under the rubric "Victory cannot be sold." And this program encourages people to not sell one's vote, to value what that means in terms of one's rights, not just rights as a citizen, but really fundamental human rights about being able to elect your representatives. Now, I can tell you firsthand, I spent much of my day in Sunik, in Vayat Zor, during the election day in 2012 in May, and I can tell you that there were numerous domestic observation groups present from many local organizations, which had at least, I would say, 5 or 6 different individuals observing from these groups at any one time in the polling station. So there was a heavy representation. And I think this was noted in the election reports. For example, those of OSCE noted a fairly robust domestic observer presence. One hopes that this will persist. Of course, that transparency in the election process is a key in assuring that it is seen as being a successful election process.
Are there going to be monitors from IFES in Armenia?
IFES, which has been in the past observing elections in Armenia, will again do so with a small team. Will be making a technical observation, but the main international observer delegations will be led by such groups as the OSCE, which has now had long-term observers arrive. I believe up to 240. Some short-term observers will arrive quite soon as well to monitor that. From the IFES perspective, we look at the performance of precinct election commissions. This is actually part of a project that IFES has been working on with OSCE in the training and professional development of election administration at all 3 levels, central, territorial, and precinct. We'll be evaluating critically the performance of all of those different levels of election administration.
Mm-hmm. And what other challenges does Armenia face in these elections?
I think one has to consider where Armenia has come from since the last election. We all know that March 1, 2008 was a very dark day for Armenia. The violence that shook Yerevan after the demonstrations after the February presidential election shocked many people and saddened them, and was, I would argue, a step in the wrong direction. In that time, there has been perhaps a growing level of apathy towards elections that has to be overcome as part of this rejuvenation of political culture. There is a lot of interest in politics in Armenia. Any discussion with any person on the street gives you ample evidence of that. People love to talk about politics. It's a rebirth, almost a re-engagement of interest in elections and confidence that one can make a difference by voting. The challenges are many in Armenia. I think there are perhaps not expectations that this election will change the course of Armenia's history. But then again, it's a longer process of engagement at all levels, at the level of civil society, in local elections, and of course parliamentary elections. This happens to be the latest in the cycle. It's a big election. Of course, there is no higher post than that of the president. I think that going forward, of course, whoever does prevail in this election, be it the incumbent or an upstart challenger, they will have to deal with the issues of society's relative apathy at the moment towards participation in elections, as well as a myriad of issues starting with the economy and employment. Just as we've seen in this country, often the winning part of the election is one thing, the governing part can be the far greater challenge.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to add anything of importance?
I, again, encourage all of the participants in the elections, as well as those who are not participating as candidates, but who are in political parties, to continue encouraging transparency, to be active, and most of all, in my humble opinion, engage young persons. Young persons are the future electorate in Armenia. They're the present electorate in many ways. They're growing numbers in Armenia. This is the key to democracy in any country, is our future, and our future is young persons. So I really do hope that at all levels of society, in education, from government, political parties, certainly the Central Election Commission has done a job of this, to encourage young people to be interested, to be participatory in this process of governance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for this interview, Mr. Bowyer.
Thank you very much.
Okay.